Okay. Well, thanks everyone who could make it. I think this is probably a quorum. And then Joe has said he's been lurking for a while and was open to my invite of coming in and kind of talking about where he's on the project. You'd mentioned that you don't have a lot of background in argument technologies, so we'll try and go easy on you.
Thanks.
But however you want to either introduce yourself or introduce kind of the app that you're working on, we'd love to hear more.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess I don't know how much to say about myself. I'm a developer for like 5 or so years, but no experience in argument really, besides just casual or like trying to propose ideas to teammates or something like that. So I do want to use the tool myself as well. So I'll just give a, let's see, I'll share my screen and hope that this works. I think hopefully I can briefly overview it, just like the core concepts. It's like not really fully functional yet, and there's a lot of ideas I have. I'll try not to go on tangents. But yes, feel free to interrupt as I'm doing this if you have questions. So I just have like 2 examples of like problems, just to kind of show some of the functionality or the idea, but they're definitely not fleshed out. And yeah, so the core idea of the tool is, number 1, to map out kind of like in nodes in like a graph format, problems, causes of problems, and solutions to problems. That's like the big one, step 1. Step 2 is being able to score kind of like what you think. There's like an implicit claim behind using a graph like this. Like you can score each individual node to say like, I think this is important. That's supposed to like help focus discussion quickly. So I've scored 1 here is like an 8. So this poor food production being a cause of world hunger is like, I think it's relatively important out of 10. And you can just quickly score any of these. You can see the edges are scoreable as well. So like there's no labels yet, but you can kind of imagine what the connections might mean. In this case, like poor food production causes world hunger, or training farmers would solve the problem of poor food production. So that's the scoring is like step 2 of the core functionality.
So implicitly, these are sub-problems. The problem-to-problem link are kind of sub-problem or causes.
Yeah. So this is like a sub-problem or a cause. I don't know the exact terminology. I do think there might be a valuable distinction between like a cause and a component of a problem. Like maybe there are pieces to this problem, but they're not necessarily causes or pieces of a solution, like components
necessarily
of a solution.
insufficient, yada yada yada. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. So
I have a kind of a question. Feel free to like say, oh, I don't want to do that, or I'll do that later. But my question is, like, can you tell us what are some use cases you're imagining? Like, hypothetically, when this tool was in its MVP, what would you do with it? Like, walk us through, like, okay, I would do this, and then this other person would do that, they would do that, and then this would be the outcome, and we'd all, cheer for joy because this is the thing that happened. Could you do kind of motivate? Yeah, would you mind?
So
what do you think about that?
I envision like multiple phases, like multiple MVPs, I guess, of different, like for different use cases, but the most like immediate short-term use case I'm trying to solve is just like one person trying to understand like their own like understanding of the problem and get as much of their information out, getting out their own like justification. So you can click into here. This is definitely not filled out as I said, but like you see the implicit claims and kind of justify for yourself, and be able to then just like share it with someone else. Maybe in the initial use case, you can like verbally or like in person or something kind of go over it and use that it as a tool to get on the same page with someone else. But that just like no asynchronous really like cross person initially, but that would be phase 2, where like you would then be able to do all the verbal stuff kind of in the tool, just with between like 2 people or maybe a small group, I guess. But that would be like maybe adding comments or suggesting having someone else be able to edit the same map as you. But so
Cool,
yeah,
thanks.
I
That
guess
helps kind of orient me.
cool. So the initial focus is like the kind of features are going to be like maybe like refactoring tools to help basically like as you're building this, as you're building out like a problem mapping, there's a lot of like problems you run into, like, oh, I wish this were over here, or like one example. So one thing I consider in the like initial phase of like I want to be able to understand it myself that I haven't really touched on yet is being able to compare solutions. So right now you can kind of like justify and critique individually individual implications, but really when you're trying to choose a solution, you need to be able to like compare them and see like, what is the value this provides versus the value that provides. You're trying to make a decision. So there's no really visual indication of this in the tool yet, but like I want to add like solution criteria. So being able to like extract what are all the good things a solution could have, like the cost or like the short-term impact, or
you're talking about multi-criterion. Could the same criterion be applied to multiple solutions? Like I see you have another type, which is support. And from the icons, you probably have attack, more counter arguments.
yes, critique.
Critique, okay. So that's very much the IBIS framework as is. Are there other types?
Not right now. I think for the comparison, I was considering adding an explicit type for the like criteria, like solution criteria.
Yep.
And you can imagine like cost being a node in between each of these solutions that has like an edge there to kind of indicate like this embodies this criterion completely, and then this criterion is actually relevant for the problem, like that. And that could be converted into a table, like a decision matrix, which is just like along one axis you have the solutions, and then another axis you have the like all the attributes to be able to like clearly see. I think these are the values that each of these solutions.
Solution matrix is absolutely something I've been wanting to do for a long time in many of my projects, because the criteria matter. Okay, right. So the other question I'd have for you is, you say compare. How well does this handle multiple editors? Is there node ownership, stuff like that?
So for the short term, it doesn't handle it at all.
It's perfectly fine. I mean, listen, I know how much work these things take. I've done them.
I definitely I definitely think long term, I envision some sort of way to like evolve the stage of a mapping. Like, you know, you'd start out by yourself, you know, kind of laying it out, and then maybe you like share it with a couple friends or something, and that at that stage you might want to do some sort of like Google Docs way of having the nodes where people can like suggest, and then you can just accept. Maybe in the long term, where you, if it's like a big, you know, sharing with a ton of people, maybe something more of the like, I don't know how the UX would work, but I really like the GitHub pull request format of
Who doesn't?
yeah. So
No, which is fine.
I envisioned something like that. I don't know how you would have shared ownership. I feel like having one or a small number of like maintainers basically is a easier way to solve the problem rather than having it like decentralized. But that's like definitely open to different options there. And it's
Hey, Joel,
up.
how much did you spend time looking at the other kind of apps in this space, and just kind of it'd be interesting to kind of hear from you whether you've done a lot of research yet or what to, and then maybe if you did, how what you're doing kind of compares to what you've seen.
Right. I have a couple of notes on other tools. I don't think any of them. Well, I actually, what was the one that you mentioned, Marc Antoine? Sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Is that Marc Antoine?
Yeah, Marc Antoine. Right.
You mentioned IBIS. Did you mention IBIS?
Yep.
I actually did not look at that one.
IBIS is a methodology more than a tool. It's kind of the grandfather of conversation mapping. It was developed in the 50s by Hans Rittel. And there's the first computer implementation was something called GIBIS, but that's, you know, X11, old code. The most common interpretation format was something called compendium. And that is the one most people got to use. It's a great tool.
I don't remember Marc Antoine. Does IBIS? I can't remember. Yeah, it has the here's the problem and proposed solution. So it goes up in that problem solution space.
Yeah, and you can add, what's really important about the IBIS methodology is you can at any point ask a new question. Like you can ask a question to an answer node or to an argument node.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's extremely important, because otherwise it's just, no, for this, against that. It's like, okay, why is this a good idea? Or what about this problem? And open up the conversation rather than be in the competitive pro-con mode. And I think that's fundamental.
Yeah, it's interesting that so Joel, each of us kind of have our own little unique kind of focuses. So like the Canonical Debate Lab officially excludes the problem, not the Canonical Debate Lab, but the Canonical Debate software, which is separate from the lab. The lab is kind of us kind of coming together, working on stuff. But the official Canonical Debate.
Is this, sorry, is the software the debate map?
No,
app?
so no. So let me see, explain it. So debate map is one of the potential implementations of some of the ideas from the Canonical Debate. The Canonical Debate is really just a white paper right now. It's a white paper project. And then the Canonical Debate Lab is an even looser group. So that's all of us come together that are interested in helping the Canonical Debate and similar systems. And it's really just, we'd probably rename it to something else. So, and then Debate Map is one of the implementations of part of that. And it's actually pretty close.
It's one of the most complete implementations, I must say.
Yeah. But I don't think it has the problem solution space in there. Right,
Marc? It does.
I
does.
think it.
Well, it's not problem solution. It's more question answer, but that's isomorphic.
But
right?
it can be, okay, it can be used. It's not explicit. Okay. Anyways, but so there's a canonical debate white paper, which is mostly put together by Tim, and for the purpose of that white paper and his philosophy on that, on which this group is kind of loosely based, the problem solution is out of that, and his original goal was to gather all the pros and cons and relationships in a single place. And it also doesn't explicitly include scoring. Like, it talks about scoring, but scoring is not one of the core things, and it doesn't include the problem solution space, just mostly for simplicity, right? And just like you're starting with the single user mode, in the same way that canonical debate was kind of envisioned without that problem solution space. Now, other people in this group, like Jamie, she's very much in the problem solution space with the Society Library, and Mark Antoine's working with her on a lot of stuff. I am focusing on just a narrow part of scoring an argument map, which is a subsection of a subsection. So I'm just building a feature to be used on other systems. So we all have different scopes. And I don't know, except for IBIS and implementations, I can't think of any other places. Maybe I'm trying to think of other places where they cover the full scope of an argument map and a problem kind of solution.
Quite a few. I mean, if you look at, for example, Debate Graph has the whole,
really?
pretty much the whole shape. Yeah. No, it's.
I guess so.
Yeah. Debate Graph has a pretty full ontology.
So I guess one like distinction that just, I don't know if this is the actual thing, but just between these, they're like putting the problems and argument at the same level, but like,
yeah, you've definitely
specifically
separated them. Yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah, I've tried to do that intentionally to make it as like the arguments are like a complementary feature to help get on the same page, but like the core or the main intent is really to solve problems. We're not here to argue necessarily. That's just like a means of getting to this more accurate problem mapping.
Arguments, yeah. The thing is, if you are going to have criteria, you want to show how each argument stacks against each criterion. Like for decision support, right? The big field to look at is decision support system, because in a way you seem to be, you're looking at decision support, and there's this whole field of decision support system with multi-criterion voting. It's a whole field in itself. And there's a whole how to do this and how to coming here, you'll get exposed to, oh yeah, how this is being done. That's kind of
that's awesome.
hazards of coming.
Hopefully you're to that point. Just to kind of mention, like, I intentionally didn't, when I was first kind of working on this, I wanted to see where my intuition brought me before I exposed myself to the history. And I think that was very helpful, because I think there are some deep assumptions that are in the community that then I'm able to kind of like see. Now I have my own hidden assumptions, but in that clash of the two, I think I've been able to find some things that had less emphasis in the last, couple thousands of years of people debating. So so it's interesting.
Make that millions.
Yeah, right. In order to come back into come into the space and then start doing kind of the research and learning. And it's a huge decision on the balance of the amount of investigating what's already been done out there and the literature and the other experiments that are not documented anywhere, compared to the amount of time you spend trying to bring kind of what your vision is so far, and then learning through the creation and rewriting of your app, which I think you probably haven't rewritten this one yet, but most of us have rewritten ours like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, most of us are like, oh, this intuition, oh yeah, but then it doesn't read this, that, and the other. And okay, let's rethink from scratch. And there's a lot of us rethinking from scratch. And okay, now we know about this mistake, this mistake, this mistake. or mistake or choice, but it's not mistake, that's wrong word. Limitation of this approach. And of course, there's never going to be, and that's something we've all agreed on, there's never going to be one tool to solve all problems, one tool to roll them all. And that's why we ask, okay, what are the use cases? What is it you're trying to solve? What we do hope is that we can come up with a data model that that's generic enough to handle most of the cases, so that at some point we'll be able to exchange data between our different tools, which make different UX trade-offs for different use cases. So that's the intent of gathering together and, okay, have we covered all the use cases, at least at the data model level? But at the UX level, I don't think it's possible or even desirable, because it depends what you're trying to do, obviously. So, but that's part of the shared assumptions of this, or at least a lot of us in this community. But the Canonical Debate project, as described in the white paper, is having one space where all the pros and cons are. There's a database, and you can see, oh, this has been discussed, and these have been the arguments, and at least don't forget this one, and so and so.
Documented and deduped.
Documented, deduped, all the work of, okay, this has been debunked this way, and kind of snopes.
And I guess also clarified, right? So
yeah.
This is a great way of saying it that doesn't leave.
But then you get into issue of, is this argument the same as this one? It's been made in a different context. Does it do the same counter arguments apply? Yada, yada, yada. So that's the kind of complex conversations we're having mostly. But yeah, to go back to what you're doing, it's not clear if you can add a problem to a solution at this point.
You cannot do that right now. Or I mean,
okay.
or sorry, you can do that, but and it just, but you can't connect existing ones, which is like I think it's a really easy feature that just hasn't been done yet, but that is on the list.
Is this a tree or a graph?
It's a graph, so it is supposed to be a graph, not a tree.
Okay.
Because you can't connect existing ones, it's less of a graph, but you can.
No, it's always what's at the what's in the back end versus what's being implemented in the front end, right? But I see it's graphy now. Good. 2 parents.
Right.
2 parents. Excellent. Okay, and you've really detached arguments. Yeah, what I'm saying is at some point you'll want to compare them according to criteria, and that's a matrix. And the arguments are usually criterion specific.
Right.
Most of them.
So I guess in the table, the matrix, or whatever, I envision you being able to like click on any cell and there'd be an argument behind that. So like, this solution solves that problem this much, then that's a claim that you can argue.
And it looks like Harrison's been typing some questions and statements in there. I don't know if we could take a moment.
Yeah, let's absolutely.
Let's see. Distract some problem like car. Definitely more favor system with primarily frames nodes as claims. Evaluated. Think beyond a generic use case, how to use it. Ideally, I think it'd be useful to help think about what is a specific example of a problem debate you've seen in status quo with alternative methods, but this tool would have helped. Oh yeah. I definitely would like to get better examples, and I think that would convey more of the value. You focus more on solutions. Focusing on criteria in this post might be relevant. All right. Oops. Yeah, we can look at that. Maybe read most of it later, but Coils framework. I've not heard of that either.
Yeah, maybe we should have Harrison go over it at some point. And I think that's where I I first found him was on the Effective Altruism Forum, I think, or one of us. Can't remember now.
Adapted from competitive policy debates, stock issues.
Yeah, so Joel, when we've given you a kind of a slight introduction, we also kind of like these videos because it's something that we can put out also when to introduce people to Canonical Debate Lab and kind of say where we are, because we don't have a lot of time to sit down and build, you know, content for this group to explain it to people coming in and stuff. Are there any questions about the Canonical Debate Lab in general based on what we said, or what would be something to be nice for a group of like-minded people that you would like to get from a community in the space?
Good questions. I feel like generally I'd be more interested in learning like about the specific tool, like hearing the specific tools from each of y'all. I know I have, like, since I've been lurking for a while, I do know, like, I'm aware of like the names of the tools and like the rough, very rough, I guess, ideas, but I'd be curious to hear more. Generally, I am a fan of the whole, like, with like-minded people just doing feedback things. I mean, hearing more about your tools, I'd be curious about what feedback I would have about them even. But yeah, I don't really know what the best, like,
No, that's good.
use of all the like minds would be, but I do realize that everybody's got their own, like, specific niche trying to be addressed. So yeah, I feel like the discussions can be very valuable though.
Yeah, that's probably the main use of it. We're also have been working on a shared protocol or framework, or some way to exchange data, which hasn't gone very far. We also have a common group of terms for use in the group to kind of help be clear, because this is often confusing, and we probably need to post that. I don't think we have that on our homepage. Maybe I need to put it there. Yeah, it's not on there. I need to do that. Yeah. It also being the beginning of the year, it might be interesting for us to. I've been thinking about in other groups, and I don't know how many people want to do this, but it'd be interesting to do periodic kind of status updates where we come in and talk about our tool and people kind of see where it's at. I don't know if people would be interested in that. And also Mark Antoine's using some of the common hand signals. I don't know how familiar you are with those, Joel, but this is
I saw in the video.
Agree, disagree. What else is there, Mark Antoine?
Well, this is kind of not sure. Me, this is no. This is disagree. This is.
It's nice that disagree is an uncomfortable position to be in, and you look a little weird. It's like, what are you doing there? I don't know, but but agree is it's a nice way to not verbally interrupt people, but
it's the Occupy jazz hands movements.
Right.
It's good when you don't want to make noise, and I mean, of course, there's the good old thumbs up, but
it's not as fun.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we're a bit of we have had trouble meeting regularly. There's subgroups that are active. There's a subgroup working on reputation systems, mostly Felix and blanking. Sorry.
I can't remember either. Who else?
Not anyway. There's a subgroup working on that. I am working very hard on a kind of concept identity. The whole notion of when do you say that two concepts are substantially the same? are actually different. And that's really important also in decision system, because if you have a closed list of options, it's too limitative. If you let people come up with options, they'll come up with something that's actually very close to an existing one. It splits the vote for no good reason. So what you do is refactor and say, this is the common part, this is the difference, and make that a subvote. But then if that's done, again, if that's crowdsourced by the same people who come up with the options, they'll probably want to emphasize their options. Yes, Johannes is part of that group, but not only. It's a problem of distinctions. You need, if you have open vote, people will come up with something slightly similar, and it can also be done deliberately as sabotage. But it's true. If you have a Borda or ranked system, but the idea is to allow new options to come up. But that's probably an unreasonable requirement anyway. Anyway, I care a lot about distinguishing similar issues and when is the distinction significant, when is it not significant. So that's what I'm working on the most. I'm also working on large scale transmission of information and comparisons between big graphs, and how do you visualize the really, really big graph when there are millions of contributions other than yes, no, you know, substantial contributions.
Is that, so I'm familiar with Kialo. I think I've seen people post about it in here, but one of my gripes with that is that there's like so much, there's like literally thousands of arguments in one map. So like, are you saying like better ways to visualize when there's like thousands?
Yes, the Kialo, my problem with Kialo is you can't reintroduce questions at any level. It's again a pro-con thing. But yes, there's a lot of arguments, no ranking, no way to know which argument is significant, yada, yada, yada. Like a good system should, for example, if an argument's been contradicted, there should be a little flag, hey, it's been contradicted, and the contradiction has not itself be contradicted, right? So there's a way to, there's ways to propagate things so that you know, but then what if it's a fringe movement? And you get into, and this is part of the reason score that Bentley is working on. I've also worked on something similar. I'm working on something similar in SenseCraft. So that's one aspect. But Kialo has no notion of merging. If two people make the same argument, there's no way to say, oh, this is almost the same except, which helps. It's also a problem of approachability. When there's thousands of contributions or millions of contributions, nobody reads them. There's too many. It becomes a barrier to entry. So refactoring, sometimes you want to refactor, sometimes you just want to classify, you know. All of these amount are in this category. They're attacking that aspect, and all of these are attacking that aspect. And so you at least have an idea of what are the broad categories. And I think that's extremely important as a way to getting into an existing conversation. The problem is if the conversation is as it's being built, and we've all done this, right? People add nodes, add nodes, add nodes. And then you get this big bushel of nodes, and it's hard to read. So you need refactoring. You need, like wikis have learned that, right? Wikis that don't have gardening, curation, they die. And the good wikis know that, and they make sure that there's somebody pruning each page's structure, saying, okay, this needs to go in separate page, this needs to go in the talk page, this needs to go in whatever. It's otherwise you get these page that has all the history and nobody will read it. So maintenance is true for any argumentation or dialogue mapping system. Right.
Marc-Antoine, I'm curious, could you elaborate
Harrison?
a little bit? Oh, sorry, what?
No, I'm just reading Harrison's, but go ahead.
I was going to say, could you elaborate a little bit on Chialo's deficiency with respect to like the IBIS ability to introduce or reframe a problem at any level? Like, I don't quite understand what you mean with that.
If I remember well, Chialo is option pro con. I don't know if you can make a sub question below, or at least you couldn't at a certain point. Maybe that's changed.
I think there's just threading, like you can have comments on each claim,
Yeah,
but I
and
don't
then
think
it becomes a
there's-
message. It becomes a message thread. That's not, and then people have to read the whole thing to know what's going on. You
Well, but I'm
need
still trying to
refactor.
understand why a pro con solution, like, can't one of the pros reframe it and be like, con against this because this is not the right way to think about the problem. This is the right way to think about the problem. And so we should be talking about it this way instead. And so if someone were to agree with that, then they could, go off on analyzing that problem instead at that point in
Yeah, sure.
the
Yeah,
map.
but in most of those systems, if you do that, you
Mhm.
haven't eliminated the old bushy branch. You're just saying, oh, we could treat this here, but the old branch is still there. So you have to read the branch to know that, oh, somebody hasn't added something since that is not in the synthesis.
Okay, so I guess in a sense, it kind of ties into the curation you're talking about. Like,
Totally.
it's hard to find the new reframed problem. Is that right?
That's correct. It's hard to know what is part of the reframing and what is outside of it. And the other thing is, in the case of, you make an argument and then somebody asks, okay, why do we know this? That's another question. It's not pro-con, it's why do we know this? It's a new question. And it's important to be able to reopen questions at any point. Like, or if you have a solution, oh, but can this solution have this side effect? Now it's a new criterion you're introducing up to a point. But if you're just going pro-con, you're saying, oh, this will do that. You can make that a con, but you're kind of presuming on the answer. Like it's really a question, could this have this side effect? And what's the evidence for and against this having this side effect? And this is something, if you can't ask a question on a position, you're a bit, and also you get into a very antagonistic dynamic. Like, this is wrong because, no, I'm just asking.
Mm-hmm.
Could this have this side effect, or what are the known? How would that interact with this? Not trying to shut down your solution. I'm worrying about something. It's not the same, and this matters. And the pro-con, like IBIS has been shown to work when you have basically a secretary doing the IBIS mapping while people in the room discuss. When you put things on the web, the asynchronous nature means that nobody's curating. It's everybody's problem. It's nobody's problem, and you get again a disorderly ball of yarn. Again, experimental, like empirical. You put people before an IBIS multiple editor IBIS graph. You get a ball of yarn. You get a curator who maps a conversation as it happens. It helps the clarity tremendously. It really drops the antagonism down. Like, people, instead of shouting at each other, it's like, oh, that's what you're saying. Or the counter argument is externalized. It's not this person, it's the argument. So now, okay, let me think about what I have to answer to this instead of saying you're an idiot. I believe strongly in the value of depersonalizing the argument by writing it in an argument structure. But if you don't have somebody curating it, it goes in all directions and fizzles out. Again, empirical. I'm not sure always why, but I'm making hypothesis there. But and I've seen a lot of what I've seen in a lot of systems. You get a huge ball of yarn that nobody wants to revisit. It's too big.
I would like to change direction a little bit. So feel free to correct me if anyone wants to continue that path more.
There's a great conversation with Harrison in the chat, and it's like, this is something I'd like to have audio.
Yeah, we could chat that. It might be good also just for people watching the video to read out the important parts of any chat. So I imagine you're talking about what curation problem is practical to solve within the constraints on participation quality in many settings.
The
Well, did anyone see Joshua's question? He mentioned that there's this Reason grant he's probably going to be involved with, like a new IARPA grant in the vein of I don't remember the first one, ACE, so ACE and then Create and now Reason. But he asked, like, how are people thinking of using AI in their tools? And I think that's a place where artificial intelligence could be really beneficial, is to try and maybe not necessarily to do the curation, but to suggest curation. So rather than a human needing to go through and like discover across the system, okay, where is the duplication? A tool like an AI tool just creates a queue of like, hey, here's all the things that look to be duplicates or need this type of curation, and the human could just be like, yep, nope, yep, okay, I need to look at that one, have no opinion on that one.
Yeah, and also finding research out on the internet. ChatGPT wasn't really good at that, but some of the other AI tools.
You've seen the Alt Primer. It's really amazing in terms of kind of transforming questions into a debate map, and Elicit also by Alt gives you scientific paper references for claims. Pretty amazing.
I still need to read through the primer personally.
It's worth getting into. Alt is doing amazing work in our field right now.
My main
put a link
takeaway
to
from
that,
just
Marc-Antoine, for people that aren't familiar. For people that aren't familiar with that, could you put a link in the chat?
Yep.
I don't remember.
My main takeaway from the introduction, Marc-Antoine, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that they're also sort of taking a stance in what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a for lack of a better word, sort of a philosophical debate of like, should we be using AI to basically, should we have general artificial intelligence doing things for us? And it seems like they're saying, no, we should be using AI to make smaller steps that are then, easily exposed. Okay, why was this step, why did this step occur? Then why did this next step occur? Is that kind of also your read of their approach? And okay,
that's absolutely true. The question of, I'm not sure it's their position, but I think it is, and I think it's absolutely essential. The idea of us delegating decisions to black boxes of any kind, and it's even a problem with decision support algorithms up to a point. You need to know why the decision was taken, and somebody needs to be imputable. An algorithm isn't. And being AI is wonderful as an aggregation tool. What it does really is aggregate what a lot of people believe. Harrison has also tried AI, and it's pretty impressive. And it's a way to mine what's being said. Now that the downside of that is that what's being said is being more and more poisoned in information warfare. And if you don't know why this is being said and why this is being asserted and what are the actual reasons for believing something, you're just exposing yourself to more and more disinformation. And that's always the issue with having a big database of all opinions. In a way, you're also elevating disinformation. That's, unless you do it with the refutations in a very careful way, it's actually dangerous. But making it clear, why is this refuted and what are the epistemic, I'm really looking forward to reading that one. Being able to know why something is justified is absolutely fundamental for human governance. And so that we don't fall in the trap of relinquishing governance to actors poisoning the epistemic well, because that's being done.
So let me try and digress again.
Sorry.
That was all good. No, that was all good. And that was part of the priority. But I did notice, and this is a pet peeve of mine, so people may not be interested. Pet peeve, area of interest for me. So in your description of Ameliorate, Joel, you mentioned disagreement should come down to differences in human/moral values, whereas right now they're often rooted in misunderstanding. First of all, I completely agree with that. I think a majority of the disagreements are actually misunderstandings. Not that they wouldn't have a root disagreement, but what both sides are saying, the core of the argument is just simply misunderstanding after misunderstanding after, like they're arguing about the surface level of misunderstandings rather than the core of what their problems are. But I see often people talking about moral values or values in general, and it feels like there's a feeling that arguments can't go past that or down below that. But isn't one of the use of these tools to have a better understanding of the reasons why we have these moral values?
Yeah, I think when I say human moral values, I feel like it's just like I think they come down to like our whole experience in life, that like, it's not an easy thing to justify, and just because it's such a built over time thing, I think it's much harder to get over. I hope that the tool would be able to like potentially convince someone to change their values. But I guess I call it out as like, because they're almost axioms how ingrained they are. And I feel like most of the misunderstandings don't necessarily need to go past that there's so much above those axioms that are problems, that are misunderstandings, that are much easier to shovel up.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, because yeah, there's a definitely a lot of low-hanging fruit before we even get to that. But that cool, that answers my question. I don't know if there's so one of my theories is that there is a bottom to debates. That is a theory that has not been proved. Although I don't think anyone's proved the alternative either, right?
I mean, like there is a bottom, as in like two people could remain disagreeing forever, or like that there's a solution.
If you locked people in a room with food and water and a bathroom and everything, and access to information in some way or another, and give them 10 or 100 years, they would come to an agreement. Like there is a way to do that, regardless of
I'm less ambitious than that. I think we could expect them to come to a mutual understanding. I think agree to disagree is a perfectly acceptable outcome. But yes,
I mean, it's a perfectly acceptable outcome until you need to do something as a group.
That's correct.
That affects all of society.
Correct.
That's not a.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, but it's a good question. Is there always
and maybe always, that's a good point. It also depends on the question, right? So I would say that the feelings of disagreement could be phrased in such a way that it is a resolvable question. So yeah, the space I'm thinking about, that's a good point, Marc Antoine. The space I'm thinking about is a much smaller space than like all of disagreement. I'm saying if two people are talking about something that in theory should be an objective fact, like this is happening and this isn't, then two people with dramatic different experiences and life experiences, I think, could get down to that answer. Or one of the answers could be, we don't have enough information, and we either can't get the information or we can, but one of those kind of three things on the spectrum. But I think a lot of people intuitively, when they hear my kind of analysis plan, it seems to be that they're saying, well, that because the scores are based upon the current status of the argument, there's always a concern that it's always wrong, and it is, but that it eventually would get us closer to reality. But yeah, it doesn't cover everything.
Harrison is making the issue of incentives here, and I think I agree. There's the whole, if you don't have the same goals, why would you agree, right? If the whole question, you need a basis. Like, for example, I believe in the value of democracy. Of course, I don't expect to come to an agreement with an autocrat. I hope to, even if there's a lot of autocrats, it's possible that they could realize that since they're not likely to be the chosen one, maybe democracy is not a terrible thing. But that's not even a given. It's certainly not what's playing out right now.
Okay, but when you're talking about whether someone has a self-interest,
Harrison's making that point in the chat.
yeah, Harrison's making that point about self-interest. It's like, well, there's two different things we're talking about here. One is what they'll say the truth is, and then what they'll know the truth is, and then also what the score would say. And actually, a lot of people argue about me using the word truth, but in this narrow definition of truth of just saying matches, reality as close as possible, but never 100%. That score would get closer and closer to accuracy as we argue, and it would get to a sufficient level to where, they could still believe whatever they want. They can still say whatever they want, but they won't be able to find a way to change the system so that the score would say what they wanted to say, as opposed to what reality is, or close to reality. That's the theory that that's my theory that no one agrees with. Anyways. So Marc-Antoine does have a hard stop.
I misread my agenda. I'm fine.
Oh, okay. Because I do have some extra time, but I also want to be sensitive for people that have FOMO about not being for the whole meeting.
Yeah, Harrison agreed totally with your list. But that doesn't mean, I think what Bentley is saying is at least 0.4 can usually be resolved with time, and I think I agree with him there. Maybe hard work, but it can be done in principle. 3, that's the data, illusion of disagreement. I'm also very worried about the illusion of agreement, by the way.
Well, the shared goals thing is a. So I'm sorry, Marc-Antoine, if you want to finish that, the shared goals thing, I think is a common distraction, and is not true. That they don't disagree because they have shared goals. They're having two different arguments about two different things, and they're thinking they're the same argument.
No, he's saying he's saying people may not agree because they don't have shared goals, which could happen.
But they can agree on what each other's goals are and what the right decisions are to meet those goals. So
yes,
that's two different arguments.
That's the agree to disagree. Yes.
Each set, well, they're not agreeing. I think there's a nuance there that saying that belies a misinterpretation. I'm saying that there are two debates with two different goals, and everyone can agree on those two debates. And so that is agreeing to disagree, but that's not. So the thing is that we all then say, oh, we should do this as a community. And everyone's saying, well, I disagree because I have different goals. I'm like, no, you disagree on whether these things meet that goal. If the final decision on whether we should do this should take into account all of the needs of the community in some way or another. So agreeing to disagree is kind of leading people to think that that state of having two different goals and munging them in one argument without clarity is unacceptable thought process.
There, I agree totally with you. I mean, the question is how to find actions that meet many goals, at least to some degree, and finding the Pareto boundary and all that. And there's often win-win solutions where many goals can be met. There, I agree totally. Unless the goal is winning, but winning over, which is a pretty poor goal. And yeah, I think if that's somebody's goal, I don't care.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and a lot of times we don't even know our actual goals, so we can only really argue about the apparent goals of each side and what they should be.
In the case of two different starting priors and experience, but this is again a case where, okay, they have different starting information, but if they combine the information, they might arrive at a combined Bayesian map with their respective anecdata and combine it into a common Bayesian map and act from that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's what we're actively fighting against, and in theory, we should be able to correct for that.
Yeah,
but it may be impossible.
Yeah, constraints on information communication and access, of course, it's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to reduce. So
we're trying to reduce those.
Yeah.
Can we have mechanisms and UX and whatever to reduce the overhead of communication? Yep. Absolutely true. How can we make the best of those 10 minutes with appropriate tools?
Yeah, so Harrison's talking about boardroom meetings can't take 1,000 hours. Although what's interesting is that, yeah, so I guess we're shortening that. It may not even be the total length of the time, because one of the things in Canonical Debate Lab, and I think is enhanced by my scoring system, is that you can actually distribute workload, which is something it's really hard to do right now. So you could have 10 researchers, you have a committee before the meeting, 10 researchers go through that and pull the information together and actually have it documented well. So you're not just looking at, oh, this is the conclusion of the researchers, but we don't know how they came to this, right? And then in the meeting, it would be rather quick for any of the board members to validate that research or assign different parts of that research to different people. So
yeah, you have 10 minutes because you're involving quite a few board members, but
Yeah.
that's the point on a reduced committee.
Well, ideally, if it's well documented enough and well researched enough, they just need to kind of review it.
Yep.
So it could be really short. But I really think that we can't distribute without a scoring system that's based on the structure of the argument. This is the thing I'm researching.
I agree.
The distribution of workload is very, very limited, because I still have to read all the claims to make sure it's true if I don't have a scoring system that's based on those claims. But yeah, so Harrison brings up an important point. There's also some situations where it's not okay to share information.
That's
yes.
an interesting point. The one thing I've been thinking about is, can we do a system whereby, like a kind of ISO 9000 system, and I know 9000's been a horrible thing, but where if two companies decide to work together on a certain area, then there's a kind of contract that any decision that's relevant to the area has to be justified and the justification made accessible between the signatories, and make kind of limited information sharing, because what were the relevant criteria of evaluation, internal criteria of evaluation, has to be shared, or even better, kind of zero knowledge proof about, we've done the due diligence, it didn't meet whatever other criterion that you judge as harmful, even though.
Yeah, and we have a few ways to kind of mitigate that, not completely correct it. Like, we have in the US, our senators and Congress people have access to top secret information where they can kind of verify. And we have judges who have the ability to review information that other people can't see. So that can kind of mitigate it by having a third party that's given access, or a second review. So that kind of may help with that a little bit. There will be limits that we can't overcome, but there's a lot of opportunity, like Joel was saying earlier. We're surrounded. We can now attack on all sides.
Third party should be open source software, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
I still think we're at a good closure point.
And we don't really have, and anyone can propose agendas in the group if they want to discuss anything. Yeah, doing an updates about projects, and we could do that as a group and or as individuals. It'd be interesting to have, I don't know if Joel has time for this, but I just thought it'd be interesting to have Joel sit with each person and go over their project and then record that so everyone can give feedback. But we can do some of that maybe next week for anyone who's interested.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Like right now I am still working, so
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of time yet, but yeah, at least the once a week I can definitely, assuming I don't have like scheduled over or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, we'll just meet again next week. This time it's supposed to have been me and Mark Antoine, but hopefully more people will be able to participate. And we'll probably do a rescheduling too. I got interested from someone else that's in the Netherlands.
Yeah, this was supposed to be the best time for everybody, and then everybody stopped coming. So
We'll do another survey.
We need to redoodle.
So keep an eye on the Hangouts channel, and we'll meet again.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all.
Thanks.
And thank you for the demo. Bye.